Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the most infamous anime scenes that sparked full-on scandals. Number 20, the end of Eren Yeager. Attack on Titan. After 10 years, almost 100 episodes, and more jaw-dropping moments than we can count, the ending of Attack on Titan was never going to please everyone, especially since it committed to killing off Eren Yeager himself. The vengeful Eldian spent the show's final season as a total renegade, so some vocal fans weren't happy to see him die as a crying kid, mourning the life he could have had with Mikasa. It's a moving moment in a fantastic final episode, but clearly a subset of the fanbase would have preferred to see Eren go out on the top of his game. Either way, no one's forgetting this finale anytime soon. Number 19, Lovers Quarrel. Oreimo. Like most romance anime protagonists, Kyosuke has girls practically banging down his door. But he doesn't want any of them. He only has eyes for his little sister, Kirino. Unfortunately, she has eyes for him too. Look, it's one thing to hint at an unsavory relationship, and another entirely to show a brother and sister pretending to get married. As you can imagine, it didn't take long for the masses to condemn Oreimo for its gross central pairing. There were even a select few defending Kyosuke and Kirino's romance, which only stirred up even more controversy. Given that the show is a very acquired taste, it's not even worth arguing about anymore. Plus, Kuronako was obviously best girl. Number 18, Episode 4, Gurren Lagann. Simon's time inside the titular mech may be considered a modern classic these days, but not every one of its episodes was as warmly received at the time. Looking at you, Episode 4. Helmed by a guest director, the divisive installment used a very eclectic art style that left many wanting. Fans were extremely critical and made sure Gurren Lagann's production company, Gainax, knew it. In response, Gainax's co-founder made some not-so-professional comments comparing fan criticism to his behind. That only fueled the fire, and eventually he was forced to resign altogether. After all the hubbub, it's a wonder Gurren Lagann is still as beloved as it is. Number 17, What's in the Dish? The pet girl of Sakurasou. When it comes to anime, cooking food for a sick friend seems as innocent as you can get, but somehow this show found itself in hot water anyway. Viewers noticed that Jin prepared Korean food for his pal instead of the Japanese dish he makes in the source material. Through some wild leaps in logic, fans began arguing the show was an offensive marketing ploy for Korean grub. Despite assurances from the production company, things only got worse when a future episode edited out the Japanese national anthem. Whether intentional or not, the pet girl of Sakurasou is now remembered more for its scandals than its plot. Number 16, Impersonation Evasion, Gintama. Even a show as funny as Gintama can go too far sometimes. In the name of a good joke, they released an episode in 2011 featuring some biting critiques for a well-regarded Japanese politician. He didn't take kindly to being parodied though. The word defamation started getting thrown around a lot, and before things got messy, the episode was yanked from airwaves and heavily censored. You can still watch it on streaming sites to this day, but just be prepared for a lot of bleeps and black bars. Honestly, given Gintama's subject matter, it's surprising stuff like this doesn't happen more often. Number 15, Karen's Pearly Whites, Nisei Monogatari. There's a lot of feelings that come to mind when watching a scene like this. The first, of course, being plain and simple, discomfort.
そんなことは言わない。磨けなんて言わない。磨くのは僕だ。
While the Monogatari franchise is far from kid-friendly, Koyomi's up-close and personal look into Karen's mouth was something else. The question is, in what direction? Fans spent weeks debating the scene's creative merits. Is it plain and simple fan service, an animation flex, or is it just meant to make you squirm? No one knew for sure, but boy did everyone have an opinion. Who knew dental hygiene could cause such a fuss?
なんでお兄ちゃんが歯磨いたりしてあげながらカレンちゃんを自愛顔でベッドに押し倒してるの？
Number 14, The Cabbages, Crescent Love. You heard that right. In this charming slice of life, there's no graphic violence, uncomfortable romances, or taboo themes. Nope, it garnered attention because it showed someone cutting a cabbage. Or rather, something that's supposed to be a cabbage. The animation left a lot to be desired, leaving most viewers in a state of shock, laughter, and amused bafflement.
料理勝負ですもの。料理は私がしないと。
The production got wind of the backlash and fixed the visual for the DVD release, but it was too late. By then, the perfectly smooth vegetable was already a widespread internet meme. There is no outrunning a cabbage like this. Number 13, Kaneki's Love Life, Tokyo Ghoul. The power of shipping knows no bounds. Even though Kaneki had heaps of chemistry with best girl Toka, a certain section of the fanbase wanted him to get in bed with his best friend Hide. But all those hopes went up in flames when Kaneki and Toka finally consummated their relationship.
バカみたいだ。
嬉しかった私はもっとバカみたい。
To say fans weren't happy would be an understatement. Some went as far as calling Tokyo Ghoul homophobic and even sent the author death threats. While we can appreciate wanting more diverse relationships in anime, this glorified hate parade went to the extreme. The unwarranted reaction is a black mark on the Tokyo Ghoul fanbase that won't be going away anytime soon.
私、子供できた。
Number 12, not so super animation, Dragon Ball Super. You'd think a property as beloved as Dragon Ball would get the time and care it deserves, but in only 5 episodes, the hotly anticipated Super turned fan excitement into internet melting outrage.
ちっとも当たんねえな。
だから言ったんだ。さっさとやめるんだ。
The show's rushed production schedule meant that animators couldn't keep up with the battle-heavy storylines. So even though episode 5 was supposed to be Super's first big fight, it ended up looking like a duel between stick figures.
スーパーサイヤ人3の力見せてやるぜ。
The production company gave a few ham-fisted excuses, but in the end, Super went down as a cautionary tale amongst fans. On the bright side, the show did eventually get its act together, but the horrors of episode 5 still haunt everyone's nightmares. Number 11, Makoto's Murder, A Nice Boat, School Days. In a scene that still drops jaws to this day, the shocking slice of life ends with some literal slices taken out of its leading man, Makoto.
世界
But that's not the most notable part of its finale. A day before the episode was supposed to air, a real-life tragedy in Kyoto forced the Japanese network to cancel its broadcast. Instead, they aired a scenery shot with the subtitles, "Nice boat." The internet exploded, frustration turning into confusion, turning into absolute hilarity. By the time School Day's final episode aired, "Nice boat" had become the anime meme of the year. You gotta feel for Makoto, his death got upstaged by a bloody boat.
誠くんの彼女は私なんですから。
Number 10, Too Close for Comfort, Oshi no Ko. While it may seem bubbly on the surface, this show is actually all about exposing the dark underbelly of the rich and famous. But in its 6th episode, Oshi no Ko blended fact and fiction a bit too well. The plotline follows Akane, an actress facing so much online harassment, she eventually tries to end it all.
やっぱりと思った。ちゃんと謝れば許してもらえると思った。
The specifics of her torment echo the situation of real-life pro wrestler Hana Kimura. Unfortunately, while Akane survived her circumstances, Kimura didn't. Later, the wrestler's mother denounced Oshi no Ko for using her daughter's death as a quote-unquote source material. Her comments struck a chord with a lot agreeing Oshi no Ko should be more sensitive with its real life going forward, while others argued that the manga was written much earlier.
落ち着け。俺は敵じゃない。頼むから落ち着いてくれ。
Number 9, False Allegations, The Rising of the Shield Hero.
おやすみなさい、勇者様。
おやすみ。
You only get one chance at a first impression, and for some, Shield Hero blew it. While its fresh spin on the isekai genre drew rave reviews, others were quick to point out some of its more problematic elements. Namely, that its first episode depicts slavery and false misconduct allegations.
お前、騙したな。最初から俺をはめるつもりだったんだ。
Viewers who stuck around found that Shield Hero handled its tough subject matter with finesse and maturity, but unfortunately, several of its protesters had already written the show off. It's a real shame. If they'd just given Naofumi one more chance, they'd have seen that the first season, and only the first season, of The Rising of the Shield Hero is isekai at its very best. Number 8, The Endless Eight, The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. In this malign storyline, Haruhi and her friends are stuck in a time loop, repeating the same summer vacation. Even though the second episode reanimated every scene, it rehashed the exact same events as the first. The third episode repeated the trend again, so did the fourth, the fifth, and so on, eventually wasting over half the season with the same identical plot points.
久しぶりのはずなのに、つい最近来たような気もする。
Haruhi fans went into a tailspin, and we can't even blame them. The fanbase's meltdown reached such a boiling point, the show's former director had to issue an apology. But sorry wasn't enough to stop the Endless Eight from becoming one of the most hated arcs in anime history.
つまりこういうことです。我々は同じ時間を延々とループしているのですよ。
Number 7, Dio and the Quran, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. As if being a thorn in the side of the Joestar family isn't bad enough, Dio Brando decided to take on an entire religion too. During the 90s OVA adaptation of the series, the vampiric villain reads excerpts from something that looks an awful lot like the Quran.
Just who do you think you are anyway? Just look at you sitting there with your back to me, leaving yourself wide open.
Obviously, Muslims weren't thrilled to see such flippant use of their sacred text, especially by a vampire who's talking about murder. In response, the manga's English release went on hiatus, and the OVAs were pulled from storefronts.
I just don't get it.
Nowadays, there's a whole new version of JoJo's to fall in love with, and this one hasn't offended any religious groups yet. Number 6, Meet the Goblins, Goblin Slayer. If you turned on this anime expecting a light-hearted action fantasy, you had another thing coming. In the very first scene of the very first episode, a group of unlucky adventurers get cornered by goblins, and it crosses more than a few lines. Let's just say that some of these party members got treated to a fate worse than death. Almost immediately after it aired, Goblin Slayer was accused of using extreme violence for shock value, and even worse, doing so without a content warning. For what it's worth, the scandal did get a lot of eyes on the show, but something tells us most of those viewers didn't hang around for episode 2. Number 5, Nina and her table. Code Geass, Lelouch of the Rebellion. Love is love, but there's a time and a place for everything. This was most definitely not the time for Nina. She's caught red-handed in a dark room examining a photo of her beloved.
Nina-san, ですか? 気分が悪いようなら、なんでもない。なんでもないの。
Given Nina's position, it's heavily implied that she got it on with the corner of a table. Sorry, we meant table-kun, as some cheeky fans started calling it. Jokes aside, the scene's almost unnecessary content drummed up its fair share of drama. This kind of weird fan-servicey scene feels incredibly out of place in a tense thriller like Code Geass. And yet, that's part of the reason Nina and Table-kun remain the show's most infamous ship to this very day.
だって必要なんです。私にとって。
Number 4, Taboo Content. Sword Art Online. It's almost ironic that an episode titled Taboo Index has a scene that literally had to be censored. To put it as vaguely as possible, Yu-Gi-Oh! Almost had to watch as his comrades suffer the worst punishment imaginable.
異性の良さは時として比例ともなり不敬ともなる。そうは思わないか、有事を集権士殿。
The moment went through heavy edits before it could even hit streaming sites, let alone public broadcast. But clever cutting or not, the reality of the girl's situation isn't any easier to stomach.
そこの田舎者は禁忌目録に背いた滞在人だ。
In the face of ever-mounting backlash, Sword Art Online's original author assured fans that he'd moved away from using violence as a subplot. If only he'd come to that conclusion a few years sooner. Number 3, the real kind of revenge. Redo of Healer. This show is like a contentious bag of chips. You can't just pick one. After all, the entire premise is basically a walking PR disaster.
全て消え去ってもこの痛みは絶対に忘れない。
Without getting too deep into the nasty details, Redo of Healer is about the disgraced wizard Kiaru who goes back in time to get revenge on those who wronged him. And boy, does he get creative.
俺は約束した。今度は俺があの女のフレアの全てを奪ってやる。
Kiaru's vengeance is upfront, gratuitous, and so vile we can't even talk about it on YouTube. Or hell, show any footage for that matter. Whatever you're thinking of, it's probably worse. You can't even watch Redo of Healer in some countries, and honestly, that might be for the best. Number 2, the Porygon episode. Pokemon. Gotta catch 'em all, unless it's Porygon.
ここはどこなんだ？電脳世界。つまりコンピューターの中ってことだな。
During the monster's debut episode of the anime, Pikachu went into the internet and delivered a shock that the industry is still reeling from. The repetitive flashing lights triggered a series of epileptic reactions across Japan, sending more than 600 viewers to the hospital. Pokemon immediately pulled the episode down and went on a 4-month hiatus to address the issue. By the time they returned to their regularly scheduled broadcast, Japanese networks had written up entirely new guidelines on light effects in anime. All these years later, shows are still being held to those standards. As for Porygon himself, he's been blacklisted from the anime ever since. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure to go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1, congratulations! Neon Genesis Evangelion.
僕はここにいたい。僕はここにいてもいいんだ。
The characters may be congratulating Shinji, but for some there's nothing to be happy about here. especially if you're a hardcore theorist. Ever since the series ended with this ambiguous scene, the Evangelion fandom has been stuck in a complete controversy of interpretation. Did Shinji reject instrumentality? Or are they congratulating him because he joined their universal consciousness? Or is this all just because they ran out of budget? Yeah, probably that one. After all, the previews did show footage that would later be used in the End of Evangelion movie. Either way, thematic or not, many were still peeved about this anticlimactic ending. But of course, some argue that's the whole point. Things have of course become a lot more clear, and people don't care as much now that Thrice Upon a Time has wonderfully wrapped up the series. But either way, back then, people were livid. What anime scandal surprised you the most? Let us know in those comments below. Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.